I think what transpired yesterday with CeeDee Lamb is damn near a fireable offense.
Stephen A. Smith just delivered the most explosive rant of his career over CeeDee Lamb's injury. When a $138 million star receiver gets hurt on a play that didn't even count, someone needs to be held accountable. But CeeDee Lamb's injury was only the beginning. What he said next about Jerry Jones and the Cowboys coaching staff will shock you. Stephen A.'s volcanic explosion. When Stephen A. Smith stepped in front of the cameras for ESPN's First Take on September 24, 2025, he wasn't just angry, he was absolutely incandescent with rage. What followed was one of the most passionate, justified, and memorable rants in Stephen A.'s illustrious career. And it all centered around what he considered to be one of the most egregious coaching decisions in recent Dallas Cowboys history. The target of his fury, the coaching staff's decision to use CeeDee Lamb, their $138 million star wide receiver, in a way that Stephen A. believed was not only stupid, but downright criminal. Stephen A. addressed CeeDee Lamb's high ankle sprain during his show, where he vehemently criticized the Dallas Cowboys coaching staff for the direct role in what he saw as a completely preventable injury.
I think what transpired yesterday with CeeDee Lamb is damn near a fireable offense. To line him up in the backfield and give him the ball on a running play. He's not Debo. He's not built for that, y'all. He ain't Cam. That's like that's damn near like taking D.O.
This wasn't Stephen A. engaging in his usual Cowboys trolling for entertainment value. This was different. This was personal. This was a man who genuinely believed he was witnessing organizational malpractice in real time, and he was about to unleash hell with the kind of passionate delivery that has made him one of the most recognizable voices in sports media. The setup was perfect for Stephen A.'s brand of combustible commentary. Here was a situation where his usual Cowboys hatred actually aligned with legitimate football analysis. The injury occurred when Lamb was lined up in the backfield for a running play, and his left ankle was trapped under a defender, forcing it inward. Smith argued that this tactical choice was reckless for a slim, tall figure like the 6'2", 200-pound Lamb, exposing him unnecessarily to heavy contact from defensive linemen and linebackers, rather than the secondary players he typically faces as a wide receiver. But Stephen A. wasn't content to just explain the mechanics of what went wrong. He wanted to drive home the fundamental stupidity of the decision with the kind of passionate delivery that would be replayed on social media and sports shows for weeks to come. The key quotes from Stephen A.'s rant tell the story better than any analysis could, his voice rising with each word, building to that familiar crescendo that Cowboys fans have learned to dread. Stephen A. declared, "You don't take a CeeDee Lamb against Chicago and line him up in the backfield in the first quarter and give him the ball on a running play." This wasn't just Stephen A. being Stephen A. for the sake of television ratings. This was a legitimate football analyst breaking down exactly why this play call made absolutely no sense from a strategic, tactical, or common sense standpoint. He continued his explanation with surgical precision, educating his audience about the fundamental differences between what receivers and running backs face on the field. When you're in the backfield, you got to get past that front seven. You've got mammoth defensive linemen and speedy and hardcore linebackers coming your way. That's entirely different than a receiver who primarily has to deal with a secondary filled with safeties and cornerbacks. The logic was unassailable. When you're a wide receiver, you're typically matched up against defensive backs, players who are often similar in size and build to yourself. These are athletic contests of speed, agility, and technique. But when you're running the ball out of the backfield, you're dealing with an entirely different class of defender. You're running into linebackers who outweigh you by 40, 50 pounds, and have been specifically trained to deliver punishing hits to ball carriers. You're potentially dealing with defensive linemen who might outweigh you by 100 pounds or more. But then came the crescendo, the moment that would define this particular Stephen A. Smith rant and cement it in sports media history. Stephen A.'s voice reached that familiar fever pitch, his passion genuine, and his indignation righteous as he delivered his most damning indictment of the Cowboys' decision-making. You don't put a slim, tall figure like CeeDee Lamb in that kind of position. That's what the Dallas Cowboys did. I blame them for the high ankle sprain that CeeDee Lamb has. That's now reportedly going to keep him out for at least 3 to 4 weeks. I blame them. I blame them. You don't do that. But that is what they did. And as a result, it's compromised them in a very severe way. The repetition of "I blame them" wasn't just Stephen A. being dramatic for television. It was him hammering home a point that he felt needed to be said with maximum emphasis and clarity. In a world where injuries are often dismissed as just part of the game, Stephen A. was making the case that this particular injury was completely avoidable and therefore completely inexcusable.
I mean, horrible. They can't stop a cold. And there's no way on earth that you can expect that offense to do. But Dak Prescott is not only going to have to put up points in bunches, They're going to have to do more than that. They're going to have to milk the clock. They're going to have to do everything they can to save the defense from being seen. Because every time we see these brothers, they look horrible.
The raw emotion in Stephen A.'s voice was unmistakable. This wasn't manufactured outrage for the cameras. This was genuine frustration from someone who loves football and was watching what he considered to be gross negligence in player utilization. Smith emphasized that the injury has severely hampered the Cowboys' offense and declared the team playoff incapable without their star receiver. What made Stephen A.'s criticism so devastating was that it wasn't coming from a place of uninformed hot take artistry. He was making legitimate football points about player utilization, body types, and the different physical demands of various positions. The man who built his career on passionate sports commentary was now channeling that passion into what amounted to a masterclass in football strategy and player safety.
This needs to be said though, and I'll give you some type of football one-on-one, so to speak, for everybody that's watching. When you have a dynamic player in CeeDee Lamb, you have to find different intriguing ways to give him the ball. Now, I'll give you a schematic, so to speak, of what coaches may think. When you play man-to-man, you can bring an additional player to kind of shadow a guy like CeeDee Lamb. Well, if you put him in the backfield, then what? What are you going to do then?
The context surrounding the injury made Stephen A.'s reaction even more justified. This wasn't some fluke accident that happened during the normal course of play. The injury occurred early in the Cowboys' Week 3 loss to the Chicago Bears on September 21st, 2025, in what should have been a manageable game for Dallas. The Bears were 0-2 coming into this matchup and had just given up 52 points to Detroit the week before. Even more infuriating from Stephen A.'s perspective was the strategic context. The Bears had allowed 334 passing yards the previous week, meaning their secondary was vulnerable and ripe for exploitation. Instead of attacking this obvious weakness with their best weapon, CeeDee Lamb running routes and catching passes in space, the Cowboys decided to get cute and expose him to unnecessary punishment.
Defensively, they are horrible.
Not great.
Horrible.
The immediate aftermath told the whole story. Lamb attempted to return to the game in the second quarter, but was ruled out after just one play, as his ankle simply couldn't handle the cutting and pivoting required to be effective. The Cowboys' offense, which had shown promise early in the season, suddenly looked anemic and lifeless without their primary weapon. The reaction to Stephen A.'s volcanic eruption was immediate and widespread. Social media exploded with clips of his passionate delivery, and the sports media landscape buzzed with debate about whether his criticism was justified or over the top. But here's the thing, even Cowboys fans who typically despise Stephen A.'s commentary were finding it hard to disagree with his basic premise. Stephen A.'s Cowboys hatred explained. To fully understand the magnitude of Stephen A. Smith's outrage, we need to dive deep into exactly what happened on that fateful play in Chicago and why it represented everything wrong with how the Dallas Cowboys operate as an organization. But to truly appreciate the volcanic nature of his reaction, we also need to understand the deep personal animosity that Stephen A. has harbored toward the Cowboys organization for over 3 decades.
Well, let me answer that question. First of all, I had a very emotionally traumatic experience with a young lady who was a Cowboys fan many years ago. I confess that, but I did get over that. Here's what I did.
Did you though?
Yes,
did
I
you
did.
get over? Because you wrote a final take about it that everyone can
I was
find
just being
online.
honest. I was just being honest.
Okay.
I'm a man of the people. But here's the deal.
Is that why you're the cold-hearted person you are today?
Yes, I am. But here's the deal. I got over that. But this is what bothers me about Cowboy fans. Y'all stick your chest out once every few years when y'all win something. You prognosticate, you talk about what you're going to do.
The root of Smith's feud with the Cowboys traces back over 30 years to a personal heartbreak. In a 2016 post on X, formerly Twitter, he revealed that his deep-seated disdain stemmed from a high school romance in the late 1980s. His first serious girlfriend was an avid Cowboys fan, and when she broke up with him, allegedly in a harsh manner, it left a lasting scar that would fuel decades of passionate criticism. But Stephen A.'s hatred of the Cowboys goes far beyond personal heartbreak. He argues that their arrogance persists, despite the team's lack of significant success since their last Super Bowl win in 1995, labeling them as attention-seeking and delusional about the franchise's relevance. This context makes his reaction to the CeeDee Lamb injury even more potent. It's not just about football strategy, it's about vindication of everything he's been saying about this organization for decades. Let's paint the complete picture of September 21st, 2025, and the sequence of events that led to Stephen A.'s volcanic eruption. The Dallas Cowboys were facing a Chicago Bears team that was desperate for their first win of the season. For For the Cowboys, this should have been a get-right game. They were the more talented team on paper. They were facing a vulnerable opponent, and they had their full complement of offensive weapons healthy and ready to go. But instead of utilizing their $138 million receiver in the way he was designed to be used, running precise routes, creating separation against defensive backs, and making spectacular catches in space, the Cowboys coaching staff made a decision that would validate every criticism Stephen A. has ever made about their organizational competence. The play call itself was mind-boggling in its short-sightedness. Here's a receiver who built his entire career on finesse, speed, and agility, being asked to line up in the backfield like a traditional running back and take a handoff into the teeth of a defense. The injury occurred when Lamb was lined up in the backfield for a running play and his left ankle was trapped under a defender, forcing it inward. What made this particularly galling was that other Cowboys legends were equally outraged. Michael Irvin, the Hall of Fame receiver, who knows a thing or two about what it takes to excel at the position, was absolutely livid about the decision to use Lamb in this way.
I always said, and I know the new way and the new day is do everything. You want a Debo Samuel, you want to do this, you want to run the ball, I don't want to do all of that. I don't want to throw no reverse pass. I don't want to run out of the backfield. I want it to be like that old Kentucky Fried Chicken commercial. They used to have a chicken. It says Kentucky Fried Chicken. We do one thing and we do it right. That's what they used to say. That's what I used to say when I was playing.
Irvin's frustration was palpable as he continued, drawing from his own playing experience to explain why this type of play call was so problematic.
That means CeeDee Lamb now has to get tackled by mugs weighing 300 pounds. You go down the field, those guys are weighing 190, 200 pounds. That's what I want CeeDee Lamb doing.
The fundamental problem, as both Stephen A. and Irvin understood, is that different positions in football require different body types and skill sets for very specific reasons. When you're a wide receiver, the majority of your battles are fought against defensive backs, safeties, and cornerbacks who are often similar to you in size and build. But when you're running the football out of the backfield, you're entering an entirely different world of physical confrontation. CeeDee Lamb, at 6'2" and 200 pounds, is built like a classic X receiver. He's tall enough to win contested catches, athletic enough to create separation, and skilled enough to make difficult catches in traffic. But he's not built to absorb the kind of punishment that comes with running between the tackles. The strategic context makes this decision even more infuriating. The Bears had allowed 334 passing yards the previous week, indicating clear vulnerabilities in their secondary that could be exploited. Instead of attacking these weaknesses through the air, where CeeDee Lamb could dominate in space, the Cowboys chose to put him in the most dangerous position possible for a receiver of his build.
I want to know the name of the coach, whether it was Brian Schottenheimer, the head coach, or somebody else. I want to know who's responsible for giving CeeDee Lamb the ball out of the backfield on a running play. Ladies and gentlemen, all things are not created equal. All things are not equal. Okay? CeeDee Lamb ain't built that way.
Stephen A.'s radio show rant revealed the depth of his frustration with this decision. He understood the financial implications as well as the strategic ones.
I paid him $136 million. $136 million. If I'm Jerry Jones, I paid him as one of the top 3 paid receivers in all of football to catch the ball away from the line of scrimmage, in the teeth of an opposing team's secondary.
The play was ultimately nullified due to offsetting penalties, which somehow made the entire situation even more maddening. The Cowboys got their star player hurt on a play that didn't even count, a play that served no strategic purpose whatsoever. The immediate aftermath told the whole story about the Cowboys' organizational dysfunction. Lamb attempted to return to the game in the second quarter, but was ruled out after just one play, as his ankle simply couldn't handle the cutting and pivoting required to be effective.
And it left Dak Prescott reliant, on this cat from Pittsburgh. And that's what you have. And because of that, your offense was relatively neutralized. Dak Prescott was left to do, but so much. Their offense was stripped of its potency.
The statistical reality of what losing CeeDee Lamb means to the Cowboys offense is staggering. The Cowboys averaged 6 yards per play with Lamb on the field compared to 4.8 without him, a 1.2-yard drop-off that might not sound like much, but represents a massive difference in offensive efficiency. Their record without him is grim: 0, 3 overall and 0, 5 in games where he's held without a reception. Stephen A. understood these implications immediately, which is why his criticism was so pointed and passionate. This wasn't just about one play or one injury. It was about an organization that consistently makes decisions that undermine their own success. The fallout, the blame game, and Stephen A.'s ultimate vindication. The aftermath of CeeDee Lamb's injury and Stephen A. Smith's explosive reaction created a perfect storm of controversy, debate, and ultimately vindication for the ESPN personality who has made a career out of predicting Cowboys' failures. What followed in the weeks after his volcanic rant would prove that Stephen A.'s criticism wasn't just passionate hot take artistry. It was prophetic analysis of an organization in terminal decline. The immediate medical prognosis was concerning but not catastrophic. The injury was diagnosed as a high ankle sprain, which typically sidelines players for anywhere from 2 to 6 weeks depending on the severity. Cowboys offensive coordinator Brian Schottenheimer stated on September 22nd that Lamb would miss some time, but avoided a specific timetable, noting it was probably unlikely he plays in Week 4. But the real damage wasn't just to CeeDee Lamb's ankle. It was to the Cowboys' credibility as a competent organization and to their realistic hopes of making a meaningful playoff run. The Cowboys opted not to place Lamb on injured reserve, IR, indicating optimism for a return within 4 weeks, potentially as early as week 6 or 7. However, medical experts warned that rushing back increases re-injury risk, which could extend the absence and worsen the issue. Stephen A.'s reaction to the broader implications was swift and merciless. He saw this injury not as an isolated incident, but as a symptom of everything wrong with Jerry Jones's approach to running a football team.
I made CeeDee Lamb one of the highest paid receivers. What y'all gonna do? I got you George Pickens. What you gonna do? This is where I'm throwing my money at. Don't make me out to be a liar. That's what Jerry Jones is saying. What's Dak gonna say in response? How's he gonna perform? We shall see. We shall see.
The timing couldn't have been worse for the Cowboys. They were already 1-2 after the loss to Chicago and facing a challenging schedule ahead. The loss of their primary offensive weapon for an extended period only magnified existing problems with the team's construction and coaching. The injury exposed the Cowboys' reliance on star talent without adequate backups, potentially leading to a downward spiral in performance and morale. His absence leaves a major hole in the receiving corps, putting immense pressure on quarterback Dak Prescott and elevating George Pickens to the WR1 role, where he must step up despite past inconsistencies. Stephen A.'s broader criticism of the Cowboys' defense also proved prescient. The same game that saw CeeDee Lamb get injured showcased a Cowboys defense that was historically bad.
I don't know if y'all noticed or not, but for the purposes of this discussion, we're going to call them the Alice Cowboys. Take the D out. No D. There's no defense in Dallas. Let's get that out the way right now. There's no defense in Dallas right now. They can't stop a cold.
The statistical evidence supported Stephen A.'s harsh assessment. 4 sacks in 3 games, ranking 29th in the National Football League, total defense 30th, scoring defense 28th, pass defense 31st, third down defense dead last. These weren't just bad numbers. They were historically terrible for a team with playoff aspirations.
This Cowboys defense, 4 sacks in 3 games, ranking 29th in the National Football League. Right now, total defense 30th, scoring defense 28th, pass defense 31st, sacks per game 29th, and third down defense dead last, so they don't stop people on third down.
The reaction from Cowboys fans and the broader NFL community was mixed but telling. Smith's comments amplified existing fan and analyst frustrations with the Cowboys' play-calling decisions, particularly under offensive coordinator Brian Schottenheimer. His outspoken blame fueled online discussions, with X-users and Reddit threads highlighting the insane risk of using Lamb as a runner, contributing to a narrative of coaching incompetence. Even Jerry Jones felt compelled to address the controversy. Owner Jerry Jones acknowledged the play call's risks, but defended it as part of the team's strategy. However, his defense rang hollow in the face of mounting evidence that this was just the latest in a series of questionable decisions that have defined his tenure as general manager.
Now, as we look at the Dallas Cowboys, I think the thing that we need to pay attention to is that this may end up being exactly what Jerry Jones wanted all along. I paid Micah Parsons $60 million. I'm sorry, Dak Prescott $60 million.
The broader implications for the Cowboys season became clear as weeks passed. Without CeeDee Lamb, their offense struggled to maintain consistency, and their already terrible defense continued to be historically bad. Stephen A.'s prediction that they would be playoff incapable without their star receiver began to look more and more accurate. The injury also highlighted deeper organizational problems that Stephen A. has been criticizing for years. This adds to Lamb's history of ailments, including a shoulder AC joint sprain in November 2024 that sidelined him briefly. But the current high ankle sprain is considered his most significant setback this season. The pattern of key players getting hurt at crucial moments has become a hallmark of the Jerry Jones era.
And quite frankly, I've been right and he hasn't. Because it's been 29 years since the Dallas Cowboys have been in the championship game. That means they haven't been in a championship game, which means they haven't been in a Super Bowl, which means they haven't won a Super Bowl.
As the season progressed, Stephen A.'s criticism proved increasingly prophetic. The Cowboys struggled without their star receiver, their defense remained historically bad, and questions about coaching and management only intensified. The team has been linked to potential wide receiver trades to compensate, while players like George Pickens and Jalen Tolbert saw increased roles but couldn't fully replace Lamb's production. Stephen A. ultimate vindication came not just in being right about the immediate consequences of the injury, but in how it exposed the fundamental flaws in the Cowboys organization that he has been highlighting for decades. This wasn't just about one bad play call. It was about a pattern of decision-making that consistently undermines the team's chances for success.
If a nuclear bomb dropped, 3 things would survive: rats, roaches, and a Cowboy fan.
The CeeDee Lamb injury saga became a perfect encapsulation of everything Stephen A. Smith has been saying about the Dallas Cowboys for over 30 years. They are an organization that consistently finds ways to sabotage their own success, led by an owner who refuses to acknowledge his own limitations, supported by a fan base that maintains unrealistic expectations despite decades of disappointment. In the end, Stephen A.'s explosive reaction to CeeDee Lamb's injury wasn't just about one play or one injury. It was about vindication of a decades-long argument that the Dallas Cowboys, as currently constructed and managed, are incapable of achieving the success their talent level suggests they should. And as the 2025 season continued to unfold exactly as Stephen A. predicted, his volcanic rant began to look less like hot take artistry and more like prophetic analysis from someone who understands this organization better than they understand themselves. Love this video? Click on the card showing on your screen for more.